Good evening. Welcome to the Art History Festival 2023. I'm Christina Bradstreet, the Head of Programmes at the Association for Art History, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this talk. We're at day 3 of our UK-wide Art History Festival, which runs from Tuesday right through to this Sunday. And the Art History Festival is all about celebrating and exploring art history, the study of art from the ancient world to the present day across the globe. And it's for everyone who enjoys art, architecture and design and wants to deepen those interests. This is our 3rd edition of the festival, and this year we've joined up with 52 partner organisations, including museums and galleries across the UK from Orkney to Penzance, who are holding a wealth of talks, tours, in conversations, workshops and family events in person or online. Our theme this year is colour, inspiration, insight, imagination. So really exploring the importance of colour, its language, its symbolism, its expression of emotion, its use in social movements and its scientific study. So I'm so glad that this evening we have this opportunity to hear curator and textile historian Rose Sinclair speak about the Colour is Mine exhibition, which she co-curated. Colour is Mine was the first major retrospective to explore the work of the Scottish designer Althea Mcnish, one of the UK's most innovative textile artists and the first designer of Caribbean descent to gain international recognition for her textile designs. So this exhibition took place at the William Morris Gallery and then at the Whitworth in Manchester during 2022 and 2023. Just a few words of logistics before we get going. Our speaker will be in conversation for about 50 minutes. She'll be giving her talk for about 50 minutes. And then we will take 10 minutes for questions. So please do write your questions in the Q&A box as you think of them as we go along, and that will really help me to prepare. I expect you're all very familiar with Zoom by now, but just a reminder that you can switch on Zoom's automated captioning if you wish. This is by the captions button along the bottom of the Zoom screen. You may need to click more to find it. You can also make the PowerPoint bigger or smaller in relation to the size of the speaker. Just hover the cursor over the screen and drag the vertical line that appears. You can drag it to the left or right. And finally, we are recording this event, but rest assured we're not recording you. So I'll hand over now to Rose. Rose Sinclair is a textile historian. She's a lecturer in textiles, in design education in the design department at Goldsmiths University. So Rose, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this today. Oh, you're muted.
I'm on mute and I'm just going to share.
Zoom bingo. Perfect. Oh, and then we just need to go into full screen.
Cool, we're there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for that introduction, Christina. And for those of you out there, wherever you are, thanks for joining today. And yes, Althea Mcnish was the first designer of Caribbean heritage to gain international fame in the world of design. An amazing woman, but also what I would describe as she had this innate sense of how to use colour within design. And in her interview with Brenda Myers in the programme Who's Ever Heard of a Black Artist, she was asked, how do you feel about this question about colour? And she said, oh, and I'm paraphrasing here, what is there to be afraid of? And I think that was inherent throughout all of her work. That one of the things that she said, and I interviewed her several times, I met her several times and interviewed her, and she always kind of had this innate sense of how to think about design and colour and how they went together. But she said one of the things that she always wanted to do was understand the technicality of print, or the serigraphy of print, because in understanding that technology, she could then understand how to push her design work and then inherently push her color work. And that's one of the things that we wanted to bring out at both the exhibitions, both at the William Morris Gallery and at the Whitworth, was not only just show you the amazing fabric designs that she had done. We wanted to take you on the journey of both her process and her practice. So how did she get to the wonderful fabrics, through both her drawings, through her art, through through the reproduction of color, but also this knowledge that she had about the technicality of print, and but also that she had this life before she came to England, that this life within the Trinidadian Art Society. She developed this innate sense of understanding how form and function happened and how color happened. But it was she grew upon it, or enabled it when she came to England. And probably some of you are out there asking, why come to England? Mainly because if we think back to the times of when Althea was alive, or when she was growing up, there was no education space for higher education in the Caribbean in the 1950s. So for people like individuals like Althea to be able to do the work that they wanted to do, they had to come to England, because Trinidad was a Commonwealth country. They had to come to England to pursue higher education. So let's go on this journey of Althea in colour. So one of the first things that we wanted to do in the exhibition was and this is both at the Whitworth and the William Morris, and this picture's taken from the William Morris Gallery, was demonstrate Althea's unique approach to use of colour, and also this notion that she tropicalized the English countryside. And these images were done really early, actually, when she arrived here in England, between kind of 1952 and 1955. So just before she got to the Royal College of Art, but prior, when she was doing both her work at Central School of Printing and also Central School of Art, where she did textiles, and drew on what we found in her archive of earlier sketches of work that she'd also done in her final show with the Trinidadian Art Society. And she called herself a naive printer, doing what she saw in her head, but she drew on the multicultural nature of Trinidad, and in that she captured the colours and the form and the nature of all that was around her, whether it was the rural community, as we see in this picture, the rural community of Trinidad, or women washing by the river, or even ceremonies related to the communities in and around Trinidad. So this notion of how she was capturing, and when we look in her archive, she would sit and she would draw these pictures in different iterations before then trialing them out in paint. So she had this notion of, she would always carry a sketchbook, and her sketchbooks are filled with drawings and paintings, and she would use crayon, Crayola, all sorts of utensils to actually capture this notion of color, because she saw the world in color. And we see that she talks about, and throughout this I'm going to try and capture Althea's voice about how she talked about color. And in one of the earliest radio interviews that we've found about her in 1958 for the BBC, she says that colors, shapes, textures, shadows and pattern are a medium of my expression and reaction. I have no preconceived plans. My color sense is instinct and links to my atmosphere, imagination and impressions. So we can see that she has this sense of how she might use color, but there is no preconceived planning in how she applies color. And for instance, the painting that I showed you previously on the side, which is, she then uses that kind of, the inspiration for that became the inspiration for the her Palladio 4 wallpaper for the wallpaper manufacturers group, which we know today as Sanderson's, Tasia. And we can start to see how she retranslates color and then picks up various textures and forms into her designs. So Althea is inspired by the things that are around her, or from her background, or from her past, or from her present. And she reinterprets them in different ways and in different forms. So the term Tasia, for instance, is taken from the structures here, which are part of this structure that is used in a ceremonial event back in Trinidad, and she reconstructs that within this wallpaper design. Next slide. And then she talks about that, as I said earlier, she said that she wanted to kind of push on with how she thought about technology and print. And if you've read about Althea and her life, she actually came originally to study architecture and said, well, I'm not going to do that. She said that was a man's job, and she said, I'm not going to do that. But she discovered that she could become what she said was a commercial artist. And within that, she discovered that print would give her the freedom to be able to do what she wanted to do. But within that, she decided that she wanted to do this. She wanted to discover, she was very technically minded, and said, you know what, if I'm going to do print, I want to know everything there is to know about printing technology. So she learned from the best people that she could. And she says there's nothing, you can't have too much technology. And her designs are known for their freedom. But she said, in order to do that freedom, I need to know what the technical developments are. And she kept that right to the end of her designing days. And she had 60 years as a freelance designer. So she knew what it was to keep up with technology. And what we wanted to show, and as you can see here in this image, this is again from the William Morris Gallery, we wanted to kind of showcase both her designs in their majesty. So all of her designs were hung and draped, because it meant that you as the viewer needed to step back and look at them. So they're almost, the fabrics themselves are almost like paintings in your room. But then her paintings, her prints, even this image here is a monograph print, because she did a lot of monographs. It was her way of almost like photocopying. Her monographs were a way of reconstructing her ideas in color in black and white. And we wanted to show that process, but also show those in their majesty as well. And in doing that, you get to understand her sense of style, her sense of scale, her sense of color, and also how she applied color. But I'm going to take you back a bit. So this is 1966, and this is a film that hadn't seen the light of day until we were doing our research. And the Crown Services did films which they redistributed right across the Commonwealth. So in 1966, they actually made a film about Althea and her work and her use of color. Sorry, I can't even show you the film here online. I wish I could. So I just took some key clips, but I put the link, the reference in here. So if you can get to the BFI, you can look at it. You can't find it online, by the way. But I am doing if you're in Birmingham or near the Midlands, you'll be able to see it at I'm doing an event with Craft Space at the moment, curating the craft of Black women, and we've actually managed to get the film in that event. So if you're nearby and can come and see it, then please do. It's a 13-minute film showcasing Althea Mcnish working for ICI, Thompson Two Tools, and the work that she was commissioned by Thompson Two Tools to look at in using colour on a new fabric called terylene. So I don't know how many of you out there remember terylene, but they saw her work in Manchester at a cotton event, and they said that this was the woman that they wanted to actually highlight how colour could be applied to this new fabric called terylene. And this film was made in 1966 and was redistributed across the Commonwealth to highlight how Britain was championing new technology in the development of terylene, which was created up in Manchester. But how here was a young woman from the Commonwealth who had become a top designer, and this is what she was doing now to promote and develop a new cloth. What also became highlighted within this whole process, that she was also championing a new way of working in fashion, working both with fashion designers and with the manufacturers, or what they call the greige cloth. And they were looking at different ways of how they could actually reduce waste. And the fashion designer and the textile designer for the first time were coming together to look at how they could actually create new prints, but actually position the print so you could cut the cloth in a different way so you would reduce waste. So we're talking about some sustainable ways of working. But she was also looking at how they could actually introduce this really hot new colours into cloth that would actually change the way in which you looked at cloth and fashion. So we see here that she was an innovator, a real kind of supporter of new ways of working within fashion. And she would go on to kind of talk about this in a newspaper interview in Australia in the 1960s. Later in 1960s, she did an interview in the Australian newspapers talking about that manufacturers needed to wake up to new ways of working. But this was a real kind of eye-opener about how here was this woman working at the top of her field, and they really were pushing her way of working. And what we see here in this picture in the top left-hand corner, or right if you're looking at the screen, is a professional Black woman working in her design studio, showcasing textiles. And that was a really unusual thing then, and it's not unusual now, but it was in 1966. But going through all of that, we then start to see, as part of the research I was doing through a research grant that I got with the Society of Antiquaries, was trying to find, well, how do we know that Althea was good at using colour? And funnily enough, newspapers, because obviously we didn't have Twitter and Instagram and that not back in 1966, but she was really showcased in lots of newspapers. And you start to see this discussion about both about her, but also about, have we ever thought about how design and colour actually came to being? And this particular article discusses how, if you were ever going to buy new curtains or new length of material to make a garment or a dress, and you like the pattern and the colour, do you ever know where it came from? And Althea kind of talks about that. While England is a grey country, she reproduces her designs that are bright and beautiful by thinking about Trinidad and thinking about the way that the sunlight produces designs and that they're bright and beautiful. And she says she's so obsessed by this longing for the sun. She dreams about it by night. She uses that to then look at the colors, but she says that she spends a lot of time in botanical gardens, and we know that from her archive, from reading her notes, from reading her about her life. She loved going to places like the Chelsea Flower Show, like Kensington Gardens, like the all the different royal gardens that you could go to, and she would use that information to try and then create this almost tropical look. But she would also go to the English countryside and do the same thing. But she would then, I would say, she would then give them a zhuzh by actually using colours in different ways. But she would temper that with what was happening within the print industry. So she would be looking at the trends, and she'd be looking at the fabric, she'd be looking at the printing processes, and then she would take that and take it one step further, and then layer that with new colors, and layer that with new kind of approaches to print. Okay, why won't my screen go forward? And again, we see sorry. We see again in the Evening Times in 1966 that it talks about, are we aware of the new people that are bringing colour into your life? And again, it's talking about Althea, talking about how she managed to get a scholarship, but also this notion about how she sees colour, how she sees design, how she's involving new fabrics, how she's developing those approaches to colour. And she talks about that. She admits that she puts all of her fierce longing for the sunshine into, and her native land, into gorgeous purples, crimsons, oranges, and large, what she calls splashy flowers. And she designs fabrics, scarves, wallpapers, and it's this series of ways of, if you ever see anything written about Althea, it's always this in this combination of this longing for home and being here in Britain, and mixing that grey with both. So the grey skies and the longing for home, and you get this mixture of these amazing colouring information. What we then see is that this comes to life in the Ideal Home exhibition in 1966. And in an interview in that image, in the Daily Mail in 1966, she says, "I come from the Caribbean and I love the sun and brilliant colours, yet I don't think I want to work anywhere except England." And we see this come to life when she actually creates the ideal, this room in the Ideal Home exhibition. But we see again her situated. This picture is actually her in her studio again. It's not in the, this isn't the Ideal Home exhibition, but you will see it iterated as the Ideal Home exhibition, but it's not, it is actually in her studio. And she has a nod to herself by having even her own mug even made up right here in the corner. But this notion that she is a professional Black woman in her studio, and she's talking about how we can live as people in spaces, how we can redecorate our spaces, how we can use colour in our spaces, and also how we can apply different size and goals to different parts of our spaces, but also how we can look at sustainable actions when a piece of furniture is not going to be used anymore, what we can do with it, how we can even craft in our spaces. And if you get a chance to read the article, it was March 1966, have a go, have a look. But also what was really interesting about this article, or about the fact that Althea was called to actually recreate this, what was called the Bachelor Girls Room at the Idaho exhibition. It was the first time that the Ideal Home show was actually showcased in colour. So here was Althea Mcnish's work being beamed into the British home in colour. So we're seeing that her sense of colour, her work was actually starting to have an influence on not just the high-end design, but actually influencing the consumer. And that's really, really interesting. That's a really, really interesting kind of dynamic, if you like, that not only was she having an influence back up in high design, but this is where we now start to see, so this is a designer, a Black designer, professional designer, having an influence on at consumer level. Because if you know about the Ideal Home exhibition, what would happen about 6 to 8 weeks after the Ideal Home exhibition, that anything that was on show there would be on sale for the consumer to buy. And many of the fabrics that Althea was designing for inside the Ideal Home exhibition would have been on sale in the likes of John Lewis's, designed by Cavendish Textiles, and so on. So there's this notion that we associate Althea Mcnish's work with just the heels, the Nascos, the Liberties, but actually she was also designing for the everyday. If you go 10 years on, we then start to see Althea's work where she's actually not just designing, but she's actually a judge on and influencing what people will buy. So if you get a chance again to go and just update your information, you start to see that she was part of that panel that influenced things that go into other spaces. I won't talk because I know I'm going to run out of time, otherwise I don't want to. And I will go backwards and forwards in this because a lot of the ways in which we talk about Althea, it's through these various wallpapers, newspapers, and so on. So again, here is Althea featured in the newspaper article in Montreal, and she's been interviewed, but she's actually then given the interviewer a lesson in how to wear a scarf. She talks about the fact that she never lost her love of painting and actually saw her textiles as painting in repeat, and her furnishing textiles informing the spaces that people lived in. But also the fact that her textiles would actually change the female form. And indeed, she viewed herself, as she stated, seeing flower pots on women's dresses, but she focused in on the flowers. So she decided that even in the terms of fashion and using color, she wanted to be the person that changed the way in which you would see textiles and see the way in which they would change the form, but using the color and the flora fauna that she was really fond of drawing and using. Take you back to, if you Vogue readers out there, if you do get an issue 1963, do have a look at it. Althea was seen as one of these young faces of fashion, breezing into this space. Althea Mcnish, where did she get her brilliant sense of colour? She designs for Asher, Heels, Liberties, won the Cotton Ball Travelling Scholarship to study design abroad. And she is there making headlines already in 1963. And she's in the fashion business, but they highlight her as having her brilliant sense of colour. So this notion that this young designer, she's all, remember, by 1963, she'd already left the Royal College of Art in 1957. 5 years previously, she'd already been designing for Asher and Liberties for 5 years by the time that this was written. And this is one of the designs that really takes your eyes when she talked about the fact that she wanted to design flowers for women's bodies and not flower pots. Because if you go back to kind of the 1950s, the dresses that some of the dresses that she refers to, the designs that she refers to, were flower pots were the things that were kind of put on women's dresses, if you kind of look at that kind of fashion. But what she wanted to do, she designed this print for Asher in 1959, was then recreated as a dress by Guy Laroche. This is taken from the book The Mad Silkman, which is all about kind of Zika and Lisa Asher. But the fabric itself is an amazing, bold, large print. And it is so painterly in effects. And it's what Althea liked. It's this bold, large leaf design with layers and layers of color printed on silk. This was printed on different types of shears and also on silk. And with each one, it is just layers and layers and layers of colors. And what we've done by looking at Althea's fabric, some of her, we found one fabric that had up to 25 colors. This one, I think, had about 14 colors. But she didn't limit herself, and her fabrics often, what she painted was always often printed. It never left its print. It never deviated from what it was. And you will find very few, if any, of Althea's fabrics ever copied because they're too expensive to be copied. And she had this distinctive writing style, handprint, and layering. And this was because she had this innate understanding of how to actually do her design work. And I think this came out of the fact that in 1963, she'd won a scholarship to spend 3 months traveling Europe, looking at the latest print techniques and approaches in and around Europe at the latest mills in Italy and so on. And so what she did, she understood how she could push print technology to its nth degree. And in doing that, she understood how she could apply color, and in what layers she could apply color, and what fabric she could apply color. And then again, we see this now by illustrated by in the Tatler in 1959. And again, it was for one of the British couture designers, Ronald Peterson. And again, another amazing silky print, but it's interesting how it's described as a floating silk, popular, but note its brightest colors and its big tropical flora. And you'll notice that with a lot of Althea's work, her work's always described as big and tropical or riotous in color. Even her wallpapers, even her interior print designs. And it's this notion of how her work captures the imagination or captures the space that it's in. As I said earlier, you've only got to start looking in magazines like Ideal Home, and as far back as 1961, her fabrics were also capturing the imagination of the ideal home consumer. And you would start to see fabrics such as this one here is a Krana by Liberties, and you would see her furnishing fabrics also started to feature in home. So you're starting to see Althea's impact on the normal consumer who's wanting to decorate their home and see themselves as up and coming, if you like. But what we also saw in our research was that they weren't only buying her furnishing fabrics to decorate their home, women were also buying her furnishing fabrics to decorate themselves. So it's this notion that they were running into places like Liberties and saying, okay, we like the fabrics for their home, but we also love her fabrics for our own clothes. Althea again, here, surrounded by her fabrics, but one of the designs that just shows this vibrancy of color, chabolas, Spanish for onions. She talks about how she goes to Kew Gardens, she works for flora and fauna. She goes to museums, she goes to art galleries, she looks for new artists, but she says, I don't often have to look very far. It's objects that are right at hand. I can see an idea in an onion or a cabbage or any other item lying in my studio. And I just love the fact that she just took onions and made this amazing fabric out of them. So, and then this print B was one of the fabrics that was recreated by Liberty when Liberty did a rerun of Althea's fabrics when the William Morris Gallery opened last year, and we see this innate sense, we see the fabric recreated, but what you can see in here is this integral layer of the colouring and the colours and the bold statement that she makes with this colour, with the fabric. And it's not for the, I wouldn't say her fabrics are for the faint-hearted, they're for those that just like bold statements. And she does this time and time and time again, and she makes no apology for this. And if you in the book A Woman's Touch by Isabella Anscombe, if you actually get a chance to get that book, she talks about the fact that designers such as British textile designers, women such as Marianne Stroud, Leda Asher, Shirley Craven, Marianne Mailer, Audrey Tanner, Barbara Brown, and Althea Mcnish, they all had their own distinctive styles of their own. And she is amongst those women in terms of design icons. So let's not just put her as separate. She works alongside those icons in terms of design interest. And like I said at the beginning, she heralded a change in textiles that would continue for 60 years. Sorry, I'm going to just go through those. So for those of you that didn't see the exhibition, I'm just going to spend the last, how many minutes have I got? I've got kind of 6 more minutes, I think, and just show you some of her designs. So we see this golden harvest in the blue, we see hibiscus here, we see eulalia, we see Chibolis again, painted desert. But it was just a way of trying to showcase that her designs had this majesty and had this power of being able to just look like they could be made today. They're modern in their construction, but they have a sense of scale. And one of the things that she talks about with her designs is that she learned how to rescale them. And you'll see this from her designs that were mainly kind of furnishing fabrics. As she moves into the fashion range, her designs get smaller, because she knew that in order to survive in the fashion range, she had to actually rescale her designs. And you can see the way that she uses color, and she's not afraid to mix the greens with the oranges, or her drawing shows through in her work. But the pink in the painted desert mixed with the orange, it's mixed with orange, black, because she always said black because it has power in it. So you'll see a lot of black in her work. And she talks about the notion that she doesn't use gray. So you'll not see any gray in any of her designs. So no matter how hard you look, you won't see any gray. There will always, black has a dominant theme in a lot of her work. And you'll see this again, black. You'll see Trinidad, one of her designs for heels. This is Tobago. The sister, for those, if there's any Trinidad and Tobago people out there, the sister islands, Trinidad and Tobago. Arena is a really interesting design. It's based on the stamen of flowers, but so abstracted, it doesn't even look like a stamen anymore. But it's this intense way that she layers the colors, so then they don't go muddy, but they still, when you look at them, they stay in your ream. So I'm going to go quickly through. But Althea had this sense of not only just working with color, but working with any color. And this is one of my favorite images of her. And you won't be able to, I couldn't get a close-up enough picture. I took this in the gallery when the exhibition was on, but she's drawing with a Crayola crayon. That's how she used color on her images as well, just using standard Crayola crayon. But what we see here is how she would also reflect that color through things such as scarves. So these are all scarves like Liberties. This one's for Jack Ma, BOAC. We also see that she worked on laminates. So working on laminates, Althea had perfected this way of working on laminates where she could hand paint. So anybody out there that is a laminate expert knows that normally you would do this through machine work. Althea had perfected a way of hand painting this process before it was laminated, through a process. You used this thing called wearite. So she perfected a way of hand painting all her designs, especially when she did this work for the SS Oriana. But she would hand paint her designs before they were laminated to retain this intense hand approach to color. And this fabric here is the original fabric that was used in her 1966 Bachelor Girls room. And this is Studio Gnarly's recreation of Althea's Bachelor Girls room. So this notion that Althea herself had this innate sense of inspiring new designers to recreate spaces that are drawn from her color palette. She says that color, shape, and pattern are a medium of expression to produce spontaneous reaction. So I'm drawing on Althea's color terms here. So for her, any color, shape, or pattern, she wants you, the viewer, to get a spontaneous reaction. So whether that's take your breath away or wow or whatever that expression is going to be, that's what she wanted you to have. And we saw this when Liberty's recreated her fabric range. Some people that had never heard of her thought, oh, who is this designer? Did she just come up today? Nah, she was around. She was around for 60 years. And again, when we took it to the Whitworth, we were able to expand on that and bring out some of her garments. And I realized I've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to shoot through. But what we were able to do was actually talk about Althea's work through another alternate lens, because we were able to do 6 more months of research and talk about her not only through the fact that we could find original pieces of Golden Harvest, but also strike-offs, but situate her alongside people that had supported her, like Nigel Cross and Eduardo Palazzi, but also start to discuss her in relation to the Caribbean arts movement. And that's a whole nother presentation, by the way. So I won't go into that now, but she was one of the she was the only female invited to be part of the Caribbean artist movement. And there's a whole nother work to be done on how we look at her work in terms of the Caribbean artist movement. But here we can see her in 8 sense use of color, and how she could take a bunch of bananas and make them look like amazing, in her design fresco for Cavendish Textiles here, or this design for Donasco, Tommy, I think that one's Tommy, and all the range of designs that you can see Tobago there, Carib, we've got Trinidad. So the how she actually then looks at designs, how she layers them, how she then applies color, and then how she kind of takes it every day and makes it seem that it can look unusual. And one of the things that we did in this exhibition, to put the maximum amount of fabrics, we back them so that the fabrics are back to back. So as you walk down one way, you'll see one set of fabrics. As you walk down the other way, you'll see another set of fabrics. We wanted to give the viewer this sense that the designs had this innate sense of making you being bathed in colours. When you walked into the museum, you could feel that you were enveloped in colour. And as you can see, she not only was able to design with intense color, but also with the simplicity of color, with this design like Signal for Donasco, where she just used pure color to create a design that you could almost think you could decorate with in the shops today. So I'm just going to. So Althea says, I found that whatever I can design, I can print. I have no patience for people who say that too much technology prevents creativity. I've always been known for my free designs. I've made a point of keeping up with technical developments to allow me complete freedom. She said, I wanted to experiment and have a great sense of technology. I want to learn the complete business. I didn't want to paint pictures and show you just any idea. It had to go further than that. So So even in 1999, looking back on her work, Althea knew why she wanted to do what she wanted to do. And one of her most, she said that this is one of her most famous designs, Bazik. And she said, she never drew stripes, she said. But so what she did, she created a textured stripe. She said it was the easiest one for the printers to print. And she would often wear her clothes. So here she is pictured in Bazik, and she would often wear her own clothes to showcase how they could actually look. So she'd have to have them made up in her designs. But Bazik was a textured stripe, which for her, she said, was one of the, it wasn't an easy design for her to create, but she felt it was easy to design for the printers to print. But the colors and the layers were influenced from a whole design with a British designer called Digby Morton, and it was all based on a kind of a Mexican inspired range of work. So, like I said, Arena earlier, it shows her experimental approach to paint, and this with the black as a dominant effect, and you can see that abstraction. But I love the fact that she talks about it, the black, and what it has the power in it to do. And when you look at that abstraction, and then with that intense orange, yellow, layered, and then there are flecks of white. So only when you go up close, you see the flecks of white. And every time I look at any of Althea's fabrics, there are things that I don't see in them until I go and look at them again. And you keep seeing that. And I think that's the true art of an artist or a painter. If you don't see everything that you see before, and when you go, oh, I never saw that before. I never saw that last time. That means there is always something else to see in their work. I'm going to stop finishing because I'm going to run out of time now. So Trinidad, this one has a depth of color in it that when you see it up close, you kind of go, wow. And this is where she plays with color, and she blurs the boundaries between design and depth. Painted Desert, influenced by trips to Mexico. What you can see here, Akrana, is this scale, but it's a riotous mix of color. And I just love what this quote in 1961 said about her color. She uses flamboyant colors, petunia, flamingo, peacock with authority and conviction, not just for effects, but she uses them with an unmistakable delight. And they are much loved by the trade. Anything that is not black and white really means something in her case. So this notion that Althea was loved because of her flamboyant colors. And that's just showing you, and I just wanted to show you a few of her images just close up so you get the sense of the color. A Painted Desert, Eulalia, and Hibiscus. So Painted Desert for whole traders, Eulalia and Hibiscus for liberties. I'll show that one. And then let's finish off last with Golden Harvest, one of her most famous fabrics, sold for over 20 years. She'd never seen a wheat field before, goes out into the wheat field, loves the fact that the sunshine is coming up over the wheat, but just has this reminiscence that it reminded her of the Trinidadian wheat fields. And this notion of the golden harvest can be seen as this symbol of her two worlds, which she talks about continuously in her work, that this longing for Trinidad and this tearing, this being that she has to be in England to create her, to make her work happen. And again, the interesting thing about Trinidad is that the black, the wheat that you see, she actually painted that on a screen herself to actually get this amazing print. So it's an amazing piece of work. when you see it. And when you see the actual layers of color, when you go up to it, it's not just orange, it's not just yellow. There are subtle layers of orange, reds, whites, creams, with this sunburst of, it's almost like you're looking into the sunshine itself when you actually look at it. And it's only when you go up close that then you then see, and then when you look at the wheat, it looks like it's swaying in the wind. And it's this notion, when you come back to that quote, black because it has power in it, and she deliberately makes the wheat black to make it look like it's swaying in the wind. I'm just going to finish off with how she draws your eye in with how she draws your eye in with how she draws her imagery. And I think with Althea Mcnish, Trinidad, there's Tobago, Tommy Dinasco. The fact that she was considered, I just love this quote by her husband, that they thought she was an old Scottish lady, but she wasn't. And then one of her dress that inspired by African daisies and zinnias. So I'm going to finish there, because otherwise I'm going to run out of time. So if you get a chance to look in Harper's Bazaar in 1966, just like I talked about at the beginning, Terraline Toile, read Harper's Bazaar 1966 and see how they took Terraline to Trinidad and did the photo shoot of all these fabulous garments designed by Althea Mcnish's prints. And I'll leave with Althea's names, and she talks about how her design is functional but free. You can wear it, sit on it, lie on it. I see people wearing my designs all over the world, and they're in people's homes and in museums. My paintings are just as free and are in homes and museums and on ships. They are my textiles and are the statements of my being. Althea Mcnish. There are some books that you can still get that have little bits on her, but I'm currently doing a book, which will be the first monograph with Yale Publishing. Thank you. I've finished. Any questions? I think we've still got time for questions.
We have, thanks, Rose. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for that. There was so much there that was certainly new to me. And I think I called her Scottish in my introduction, which was completely ridiculous of me. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, lots of questions here. How long did the collaboration with ICI last?
That was, I think that was initially a year. From what I can find out from the research, the whole was Tootle Thompson's, which was obviously part of ICI. That was about a year's collaboration.
And you talked about her keeping up with technical developments. What kind of technical developments were you referring to?
So she knew about different types of printing. She knew about yarn. She knew about dye. She knew about fabrics. She did the Cotton Board's award that she won back in 1963 allowed her to travel 3 months around Europe, going to all the various printing firms. She then came back and did a report for the Cotton Board, and then had to present to 200, what she called 200 men in grey suits, about the trends that were happening in Europe and what they needed to do here in Britain to change the printing industry. She went to different shows herself. She did things like Premier Vision. She did several trade shows as with the help of the British Board of Trade. She presented. She went to the States several times and did work over there. We know that she was working with different design companies. She did development. She was used as a consultant for different companies as well. Color for different types of color work.
Thank you. And Max asks, did her bolder color designs create any new technical issues when taken into print, like saturation of colors? Was she, when she was replicating her originals, was she always happy with the color depth achieved in the fabric?
Well, what she did, what Althea did, her paint, I've seen her original painted artwork. It would be sent off, a lot of the artwork was sent off to Italy, and it would then be replicated as in screens, saying it was going to be 12, whatever, 12 screens or whatever. And then it would be brought back to various companies back here that might print it or be printed in Italy. And her designs were replicated as they were made. They did not, the companies did not change anything in her designs. The colors, because what we got to recognize was that during the late 50s, early 60s, new printing technology came on board as well. Different types of screen printing technologies came on board. Different types of fabrics were coming on board. So as a result of that, Althea knew how she could get her fabrics printed.
There's a long question here, which I haven't had a chance, sorry, Carol, to read properly. I'm just going to kind of skim it. So Carol is asking that, given that the early 1960s was such a pivotal time, socio-politically, culturally, and legislatively throughout the Commonwealth and the colonial islands and the Caribbean in particular, could you say more about the extent to which Althea was a visible and active political figure?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Advocate for equality and racial justice. Is that something that she was involved with and was important to her?
It was important to her. The fact that she was a member of the Caribbean artist movement, I think, says volumes about the fact that she recognised that there was a need to make change. I know that she worked with people like the Trinidadian carnival person, and I can't remember his name. His name has just slipped my memory. I know that she went backwards and forwards to Trinidad, and I know that she was an active. Okay, let's go backwards. When she was before she left Trinidad, she was very active within the community to make art for everybody. And she worked with the local priests in making sure that children could engage with art. I know that when she went back she went back to Trinidad in 63. And again, she worked with the local schools and colleges to think about how art, textiles could become a more active part of the community. I know that within when she was a art lecturer, that she wrote a piece about the way in which how in art education we needed to change access routes. I know that she was active within the RCA, creating opportunities for students to get scholarships. So what she did, she used education as the tool to actually say we could make change. And one of the things that she said to me, I remember talking with her, and she said, "Rose, I opened the doors so others could follow." So she was really clear that she knew that what she was doing was she was the first in a lot of instances, and she was really clear that while she might not be one of these people standing on podiums and shouting, she was doing other work behind the scenes. And I know that she did a lot of work in her a lot of local primary schools in her area, where she was going in and showing them what art could do and where art could lead you. So she was doing lots of work behind the scenes in different ways. And I know that she did a lot of work with back in Trinidad. She would, when she would go back, and she was on lots of boards like the Design Council. We know that she was one of the founding members of the boards for the London Institute, which is now UAL. So we know that she was doing a lot here. And the fact that she was one of the she started off in the Trinidadian Art Society, which is the longest cultural Caribbean cultural arts movement, founded in 1943, celebrating its 75th year, I think, this year, if I've got my maths right. So it tells us that she has a longevity in terms of telling stories. And we know that she was working with people like the founder of Notting Hill Carnival, one of the founders of Notting Hill Carnival, name has just skipped. Under pressure, things come out of your head, don't they? So we know that in the 1960s she was working within the Notting Hill Carnival. So we know that she was doing things behind the scenes, and I know that she mentored a lot of students. That's one of the things that's come out of the research that we did. She mentored a lot of students, and she worked in places like Hornsey School of Art, Walthamstow School of Art, Ealing School of Art. So in the early 60s, she was mentoring a lot of students in those spaces. I hope that answers your question.
More than, yeah, absolutely. Pauline wanted to know how is it that her incredible influence on bringing colour to Britain has been lost or obscured over time?
I think what's happened, okay, there have been a range of texts that document her in different ways. So they document certain parts of her textiles, and her whole history, if you like, has never been documented in one book. So you can't go into the library and find one book on Althea. What you find are chapters and footnotes and pictures and illustrations. You don't find the whole history. You might find interviews and you might find chapters. So in the last 5 years, you will find chapters and you'll find interviews and you'll find people writing in journals, but you won't find one definitive book. And I think that's probably the issue. That's where we're at the moment. So the fact that we did the exhibitions at William Morris Gallery and the Whitworth has come out of a 3-year research grant. That's why that this work has happened, and that's the challenge has been finding the archive and finding the work, and it's a lot of foot slogging work in going into libraries and going into various spaces to find that, and people saying to you, oh, we don't have that information, and you know that they do. And so going into archives when archives haven't documented somebody is really hard, because you have to say, but your database says this, but you're telling me you don't have it. And then you have to kind of double whammy them and go, well, actually, I found it. Can you tell me where it is? So it's this notion of knowing your stuff before you go in and finding it in different ways.
That sounds really hard. Yeah, amazing that you've done this, really. Just one final question, which was whether she made her own clothes for herself or her fabrics for her own use.
Althea had others make her clothes for her. So we've I think in her archive, I think we're up to 15 garments now. So what we have found is that she had a friend, a colleague of hers that went to her high school in Trinidad, called Inez Wharton, was a designer who actually we know showcased her work in 1966 at a fashion show for Commonwealth designers here in England, and she created some of the garments that we showed at the Whitworth. But also her mum was a talented seamstress dressmaker who actually also made some of her clothes. And then she also had some of them made by professional tailors, makers here. And we found one garment where she had a complete outfit and shoes made up in one of her fabrics.
Wow.
So she would often have, as soon as the fabric came out, she would often have several garments made out in different colorways of her designs, and we had a couple of them where we've got the photographs where we didn't have the garments, and then I've gone back into the archive and I've now found the garments, and she's had them made up in like the Liberties Merino fabric, or we've found some made up in some Danasco fabric. But she also is a collector, so we found some we know that she designed for other people, so we found, for instance, she designed for Bieber. So not only did she design for, we know, for Dior, and as you saw, Guy Laroche and so on, but we now know that she designed for Bieber. So that tells us how her work was out there without people knowing. But the fact that she herself wanted to illustrate that her cloth looked great on the human form was part of that process. So she always designed her fabric so it would look great on the human form, because she realized that design on the body, or fabrics on the body, if you look good on the body, then you felt good. So she wanted to illustrate that her cloth works, and so she could go into an interview wearing her work.
Amazing, thank you so much. So we'll have to wait for your book to come out. Who's publishing that? Next year. Who's publishing it?
Yale Publishers. I think my editor's in the room.
Do you have a title for it?
At the moment, the working title is Althea Mcnish, Colour is Mine. I've kept it simple.
Okay, so we'll look out for that. Are her designs on permanent display at the Whitworth now, or is it still?
No, that current exhibition ended. So I think, I'm not quite sure what's on display at the Whitworth now. I think one of her designs is on display in the Rapid Response Gallery at the V&A. I'm not sure what's on display at the Whitworth at the moment. Obviously, it was only temporary at the William Morris Gallery. I know that Life Between the Islands, that was here. So if you're in Canada, if anybody's in Canada and you're going to Toronto, go see the new Life Between the Islands in Toronto, because there'll be some pieces on display there at the AGO. But at the moment, I know that one of the things that we did at Goldsmiths, part of the funding, we got pieces to go in what we call our Constance Howard gallery. So we now have quite a few pieces of Althea Mcnish fabric. So if you want to see some pieces close up, then contact our Constance Howard gallery special collections, and I'm sure they would facilitate some visits.
At Goldsmiths?
Yeah, at Goldsmith.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rose. That was so interesting and informative. Really appreciate you taking the time for this, and thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, everyone. As well. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all.
Yeah, but if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer any of the questions by email. If anybody's got any questions, you can email me. I'm happy to answer those by email.
So stay with the festival. The festival continues up until Sunday evening, with lots more free events coming up online or at an art gallery near you. So do take a look at our festival programme, which is on our website, forarthistory.org.uk, and on social media at For Art History. I'll pop that in the chat in a moment. If it's online events that you're particularly looking for, you might check out the Problem of Colour, which is an event Christie's Education are hosting at 6 p.m. on Saturday, a free event with Ben Street, which will be exploring the limits of language for conveying colour. So again, thank you, Rose. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening, everyone. Goodbye.
Yeah, have a good evening, everybody. Bye. Bye.